Disclaimer: these are not the questions I had in exam. I signed NDA. I cannot share them here. 900 Azure Fundamentals. This is the first certification you do in order to get started with Azure and cloud. So you start your journey with cloud with this certification. This certification is not compulsory to do other certifications like if you want to get the Microsoft certified expert for Azure Solutions Architect or DevOps expert, you don't need this certification necessarily, but you do need then the developer certificate, which is associate certificate. But in order to get started with cloud, you really need to get the fundamentals so that you are familiar with Azure cloud terms. So this is basically a non-necessary exam, but really important to get familiar with cloud. And this happens often happens that people fail this exam because this is more of like you have to remember it, you have to remember everything, and that is what people don't like. So let's get started with these 135 updated question after the last update in May 2022. And then so I will be going through these 135 questions and answering them as well, and this will be a long series, so if you should be well prepared for it. Grab a cup of coffee and get refreshed. You can pause the video later on and then join again, of course. So let's get started. So the first question is, which of the following is not a cloud computing? So which of the following is not a cloud computing term? So public cloud, scalable cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud. There are only three types of cloud: private, public, and hybrid. Scalable cloud doesn't exist. This is the scalability is the benefit of cloud, but it's the type of cloud, it doesn't exist. So the correct answer is scalable cloud, so which is because we were asking for not a cloud computing. Let's go to the next one. This is a question which generally you answer, and then if the statement is if so there is a statement which says something, and then if it is correct, you say no change is needed. If the statement is incorrect, you select the answer you need to add there. So if Microsoft plans to end support for an Azure service that does not have a successor service, Microsoft will provide notification at least 12 months before instructions are review the underlying text. If that makes the statement correct, select no changes needed, and otherwise in other cases select the correct answers. So in case the normal policy from Microsoft is, if they plan to end any service, that means like if they don't have any successor version or service, then they generally notify you. And what is that notification period? Let's see the answer. The correct answer is no changes needed, meaning the least they need to notify you at least 12 months before, which is the general time period from Microsoft. Let's go to the next one. You have an application that is comprised of an Azure web app that has a service level agreement of 99.95% and an Azure SQL database that has an SLA of 99.99%. The composite SLA for the application is the product of both SLAs, which is equals to 99.94%. So it is the same type of question. This is a statement, and then you need to say if this statement is correct or not. So no change is needed. The lowest SLA associated with to the application, which is 99.95%, the highest SLA associated 99.99. The difference between the two SLAs, which is 0.5%, so that cannot be right, that is not possible. And if one service is 99.95, then definitely you can not go for 99.99 because this service SLA is lesser. So generally from Microsoft it's a product, and the correct answer is no change is needed because the product of 99.99 multiplied by 99.95 becomes 99.94. So remember this, the SLA, and if there are two services and they have different uh, um, SLA, then the product, the SLA for the whole service is product of both services. I don't really have a specific number on the questions here, so because I didn't want you to bother how many questions you have finished. Well, that is also kind of motivation. Sometimes you want to say, or you want to tell yourself, oh yes, I have completed these many questions, but I deliberately did not put any question number here. So okay, let's continue. You have an on-premises network that contains several servers. You plan to migrate all the servers to Azure. You include in the recommendations. You need to recommend a solution to ensure that some of the servers are available if a single Azure data center goes offline for an extended period. So what should you do? So is it clear? In case some of the servers are available if a single Azure data center goes offline for an extended period. So if one data center goes offline, what solution do you propose, or what is that solution that your other servers are still available? So the availability set, fault tolerance, scalability, elasticity, low latency. These are really nice terms, good terms, but confusing terms. You will always have questions around these terms. I'll put a link in the description so that you can one by one really visit them and understand the difference. I will try to explain it here. Ability set is a set of applications which are grouped together logically. In case of if you need to scale your application, then another application, another similar uh, set will be picked up. Fault tolerance is the ability of a system to continue to function in the event of a failure of some of its component. So what do you think the answer is in this case? Because we are talking about you need to recommend a solution to ensure that some of the servers are available if a single Azure data center goes offline, and the fault tolerance is uh, the ability of a system to continue to function in the event of failure of some of its component. So the correct answer is fault tolerance. Then you have a scalability, which is ability to scale up in event of high traffic. Elasticity, even ability to handle the load. Well, I just don't want to give you wrong information here, because I really want you to go and check on internet about these terms. You will be happy. Okay, let's continue. Which two types of customers are eligible to use Azure Government to develop a cloud solution? Very nice question. Each correct answer presents a complete solution. Note, each correct answer is worth 1 point. So this means it is multiple choice question. You can have multiple answers. A Canadian government contractor, a European government and European government contractor, a United States government entity, a United States government contractor, a European government entity. When you talk about Azure government, Azure government is especially for US government. So what will be the correct answer? United States government entity and United States government contractor. If we talk about again Azure government, what is Azure government? Azure government is the mission critical cloud delivering breakthrough innovation to US government customers and their partners. Only US federal, state, local, and tribal governments and their partners have access to this dedicated instance with operations controlled by screened US citizens. So, this is especially for US, and no other person has access to these two to this Azure government. So it is really good question, and you might have this question in many other forms, but just remember, only US government or local or federal governments and its partners have the access. Let's continue. In Azure, what do you understand by application availability? I told you to learn those keywords, but again, what is application availability? If you want to look at the internet, just pause this video and search for, you will find a lot of information. But to give you an idea, application availability is a measure used to evaluate whether an application is functioning properly and usable to meet the requirements of an individual or business. So what in these options, let's read one by one. Application is available to high-end users, the individual SLA of each resource, the overall time that system is functional and working. For us to measure the availability of an application, the application should be it is measured as the used to evaluate whether an application is functioning properly and usable to meet the requirements of an individual or business. So what is the correct answer? The last, overall time that a system is functional and working. Let's continue. Your company plans to start using Azure and will migrate all its network resources to Azure. You need to start the planning process by exploring Azure. What should you create first? Good question. So you are planning to move to Azure, migrate all its network resources, and migrate your company's network resources. What would you do first? You are just going to the cloud. So hierarchy given on Microsoft documentation is you have management group, you have subscription, you have resource group, and then you create resources. Management group provides a governance scope. Governance scope above subscription. However, management group is not mandatory component in Azure. They help you to efficiently manage access, policies, and compliances for those subscriptions. So it is not necessary to create a management group. You need to have a subscription, of course, to move to Azure. Then you need to have a resource group, and virtual network is not necessarily needed, but these two things are needed. But what will you do? What will you create first? A subscription. So let's see the correct answer, a subscription. So the next question is, you plan to build an enterprise data warehouse in Azure to perform business data analysis. The requirement is to build an integrated environment that will support the development of end-to-end analytical solutions. Which service should you use for this? So you need to build analytical solutions, and you need to use so you are using enterprise data warehouse, and and this should be integrated environment, and it should have some analytical solutions. So what will you use in below? So what options you should use? Azure machine learning. Azure machine learning is more for performing machine learning related tasks, but I don't think you are doing it here. Azure Synapse Analytics, which is possible because yes, you are doing as enterprise data warehouse, and you are doing in also analytical solutions. Azure database for PostgreSQL, which is really specific to Postgre. So our remaining options here is only B. So the answer is Azure Synapse Analytical, because Azure machine learning is incorrect because it does not provide enterprise data warehouse service. Azure machine learning is a development platform for coding machine learning. Azure Synapse Analytics is a data analytics platform um, that combines data integration, enterprise data warehousing, and big data analytics. It is possible to build a data warehouse that can be used for BI and machine learning by integrating data collection, exploration, preparation, and management. It also significantly reduces the time it takes to develop your project with an integrated experience that supports the development of end-to-end analytical solutions. So Azure Synapse Analytics can be a good solution here. There might be other solutions as well, but from these three, Azure Synapse is the best solution, because Azure database for PostgreSQL is a relational database service based on the open source Postgre database engine. It is not used to build data warehouse, and it does not also have analytical solutions. So you are the data engineer for your company. Okay, an application uses a NoSQL database to store data. The database uses the key value and wide column NoSQL database type. Developers needed to access data in database using an API. You need to determine which API to use for database model and type. Which two APIs should you use? So basically you are using a NoSQL database to store key value columns, key value pairs. So if we look here, Cassandra provides key value pair. Table API, no. SQL API, no. Gremlin, no. MongoDB, yes. So what will be the answer? Cassandra API and MongoDB API, because there might be two answers, because which two APIs you should use, it says, of course. Yeah, okay, let's continue. Which two types of customers are eligible to use Azure Government to develop a cloud solution? We have already talked about this, and this is a United States government entity and United States government contractor. A hybrid cloud is a part of public cloud. A public cloud is a part of hybrid cloud. So we need to determine if these sentences are correct or not. So let's see. A hybrid cloud is a part of public cloud. What is hybrid cloud? Your application resides on premises or in private cloud. Many times sudden spikes in demand overload the capacity of your application, like season events like online shopping or tax filing. Organizations can tap into additional computing resources in the public cloud, and that is sometimes called cloud bursting, where the hybrid cloud environments allows the on-premises infrastructure to take the advantage of public cloud. Many customers take advantage of the hybrid cloud to achieve global scale, increased reliability in highly regulated industries, data residency, Requirements may mandate that certain sets of data must be kept on premises while other workloads can reside in public cloud. So like data um, for medical data, sometimes they are regulated to keep them on premises, but some of the data can be put in the cloud. So what is hybrid cloud? Hybrid cloud is part of public cloud. What do you think of this sentence? It's wrong, because hybrid cloud cannot be part of public cloud. A public cloud is part of hybrid cloud. Yes. So answer is for the first no, second yes. Let's go to the next one. You have an on-premises network that contains 100 servers. You need to recommend a solution that provides additional resources to your users. The solution must minimize capital and operational expenditure costs. What should you include in the recommendation? So the solution you want is must minimize capital and operational expenditure, and you need to recommend a solution that provides additional resources to your users. So what would you suggest? A complete migration to public cloud, an additional data center, a private cloud, a hybrid cloud? Because again, same, take advantage of hybrid cloud to minimize cost. Your application resides on premises or in private cloud. Many times sudden spikes in demand overload the capacity of your application, like seasons, online shopping, same thing. And in that case you want to take advantage of additional resources, and to do that you can have a private cloud in Azure or whatever, and then you can use those resources. So similar, basically complete migration is not needed if you don't want, and because we want to minimize the capital and operational expenditure. An additional data center, why would you create an additional data center? That is expensive. A private cloud, and then hybrid cloud, which means like you keep your own premises servers and you add extra servers in the cloud. So this one will be the cheapest option. Okay, a hybrid cloud. Let's go. Define availability set. I already told you, look at the internet about these terms, because these terms will keep coming. So let's look at the availability set. Group of instances of your application in an availability zone. No. A logical grouping of VMs that allow Azure to understand how your application is built to provide for redundancy and availability. Yes, and that is C is set of resources, which could be correct, but what set of resources of what? So this, if you extend this sentence with multiple with some criteria, this could be correct. This is not correct, because it is not a group of instances of your application in availability zone. So the available somewhat correct definition is B, because an availability set is a logical grouping of VMs that allows Azure to understand how your application is built to provide for redundancy and availability. It is recommended that 2 or more VMs are created within an availability set to provide for a high availability application. And to meet the SLA, you have SLA of 99.95%. Let's continue to the next one, which is your company plans to deploy an artificial intelligence AI solution in Azure. What should the company use to build, test, and deploy predictive analytics solution? So you have options: Azure Logic Apps, Azure Machine Learning Studio, Azure Batch, Azure Cosmos DB. You want to make use of artificial intelligence solution in Azure, and to do that, Azure Logic Apps is not sufficient enough, because Azure Logic Apps provide you some predefined modules, like if someone tweeted, you react to that tweet with some drag and drop options, but it is not a artificial intelligence. You want to work on those solutions, and also added here, company to use to build, test and deploy predictive analytics solutions. So that is not sufficient. Azure Machine Learning Studio, yes. Azure Batch, no. Azure Cosmos DB, no. So Azure Machine Learning Studio is the only answer, which is a drag and drop tool you can use to build, test and deploy predictive analytics solutions. So the correct answer is Azure Machine Learning Studio. Which Azure service should you use to correlate events from multiple resources into a centralized repository? So which Azure service should you use to correlate events from multiple resources into centralized repository? Azure Event Hubs, Azure Analytics Services, Azure Monitor, Azure Log Analytics. Because you want focus on the last line, multiple resources into centralized repository, because log analytics is a tool in Azure portal to edit and run log queries from data collected by Azure Monitor logs and interactively analyze their results. You can use log analytics queries to retrieve records that match particular criteria, identify trends, analyze patterns and provide various insights into your data. And if we talk about what is the difference between Azure Log Analytics and Azure Monitor, because you always get confused. It's a bit like the relationship of Office to Word, Excel, etc. Monitor is brand and Log Analytics is one of the solution, you can say. Log Analytics and application insights have been consolidated into Azure Monitor to provide a single integrated experience for monitoring Azure resources and hybrid environments. So Azure Monitor holds Azure Log Analytics. So sorry, the correct answer for this one was Azure Log Analytics. I already switched this. Once again, I just want to remind you that this is not only the suggested solutions. I don't believe in dumps, so these questions I did not have them in my exam, and I'm not displaying them, otherwise I will lose my certification. And giving away the questions you had in your exam is illegal from Microsoft, and you sign an NDA. So I'm not recommending that thing here. Please look for yourself and check. Yeah, so you should also study apart from these questions only. Let's continue. So these are special questions, special because these are just yes or no questions, no options, and you just need to suggest yeah, answer yes and no. So you generally, what happens is you are given with a sentence, and then you are asked for a solution, then you say yes or no, and then different solutions are there. Or you are given with the statements, and then you just say yes and no, true or false. So your Azure environment contains multiple Azure virtual machines. You need to ensure that a virtual machine named VM1 is accessible from the internet over HTTP. So you modify an Azure firewall. Does that meet the goal? The same solution is you modify a DDoS protection plan. Does this meet the goal? And then another solution is you modify an Azure Traffic Manager profile. Does this meet the goal? So for these, to answer this, we need to understand what is Azure firewall. You need to understand what is DDoS protection plan, and then you need to understand what is Azure Traffic Manager profile. So I really suggest you to look on the internet for these three things, but I will be with a bit brief, and I will explain them here. What is the answer? So yes, Azure firewall, modifying the Azure firewall meets the goal, because Azure firewall allows you to edit, create your own rules, and by adding your own rules you can allow traffic over the internet, over HTTP, sorry. And then modifying DDoS doesn't necessarily meet the goal, because DDoS protection plan is something different. It's not at all related to this. And then same way, Azure Traffic Manager is for something else. Azure Traffic Manager is for managing the traffic to the Azure resources, and yeah, so that is not for this one. I hope it's clear. Let's continue. Then you have, which of the following correctly define as computing? As computing is really good one. As computing is the deployment of computing and storage resources at the location where data is produced. This ideally puts compute and storage at the same point as the data source at the network edge. So what is as computing? As computing allows you to secure a data application on multiple locations. Then second option is, as computing allows customers to run VMs, containers and data services at the same location, at the edge locations. And then the third is, as computing allows you to create scalable web applications. What is the correct answer? Then the correct answer will be B. As computing allows customers to run VMs, containers and data services at edge locations. As I said, these locations are put together at the network edge. Let's continue. So Azure Key Vault is used to store secrets for Azure Active Directory user accounts. Instructions are, if this statement is correct or not, if any change is needed. So what is the Azure Key Vault is used to store secrets for Azure Active Directory user accounts. That sounds funny, right? Already that is not the case, right? You cannot, you can it is really something like you will laugh at, because Azure Key Vault is a resource. Azure Active Directory is also an Azure resource, but it is throughout your organization. And if you, yeah, it's funny. I don't know how can you explain this, but anyway, let's see the options. No changes needed. Definitely you need to change this. Azure Active Directory administrative accounts, no. Personally identifiable information, what is that? And then you have server applications. So I don't belong to these three, so the ultimate answer is server applications, because definitely I don't recognize with the with the with these three. Okay, let's continue. From Azure Cloud Cell, you can track your company's regulatory standards and regulations such as ISO 27001. And so this is the statement, and you need to check if this is correct or not. So from Azure Cloud Cell, you can track your company's regulatory standard and regulations. Not right? So then the options are, no changes needed. Definitely I think there is a change needed. The Microsoft Cloud Partner Portal, Compliance Manager and the Trust Center. And the correct answer is the Trust Center, because the Trust Center is an important part of the Microsoft Trusted Cloud initiative and provides support and resource for the legal and compliance community. The Trust Center provides in-depth information about security, privacy, compliance offerings, policies, feature and practices across Microsoft Cloud products. So the answer is the Trust Center. Let's go. and then again same yes and no questions, and this time this is a statement, and then you need to tell if it's true or not, true or false, or yes or no. The only way to use Azure resources is to purchase an Azure account before you can use them. There are ways, I guess, but let's continue. Azure Active Directory can be used to grant or deny access based on originating IP addresses. Okay, Azure Firewall can be used to grant or deny access based on originating IP addresses. So, this question I kind of answered already. I want you to answer these two questions, and if you want, you can pause. Otherwise, we can continue. So let's see the answers. You can use free Azure account or a Microsoft Learn sandbox to create resources. So you don't really need an Azure account to create Azure resources. So that answer is no. Then the Azure Active Directory can be used to grant or deny access based on the originating IP address. No. Azure Active Directory, this is really confusing question, actually. Might get you in trouble, and you might get sometimes you might get confused with MFA as well, things like that. But no, Active Directory is not handling anything related to IP address. But in the Azure Firewall, you can deny access on originating IP address, because you can create IP rules and then you can say you don't want to allow the traffic. Let's continue. So your company plans to deploy several million sensors that will upload data to Azure. You need to identify which Azure resources must be created to support the planned solution. Which two Azure resources should you identify? So you need to select two resources which you need to select for your plan, because your company plans to develop several millions of sensors. So this is related to sensors. So the first thing comes into my mind is definitely Azure IoT, because these are IoT devices. So definitely you will need a IoT solution to upload the data to Azure. And then you need to identify which Azure system must be created to support the planned solution, and you need to plan to deploy several millions of sensors. So you need to store that data as well somewhere. So the correct answer is Azure Data Lake and Azure IoT Hub, because data lake can be used to store the data from devices and sensors. Queue is exclusively for messages, but we are collecting data. So Azure Files is a cloud storage service designed for sharing files, development or debugging tools, and applications that rely on native file system. So and D is IoT Hub for data processing. So as I said, IoT we will need, and Azure Data Lake is good for store the data from devices and sensors. So obviously two answers: first Data Lake and Azure IoT Hub. Let's continue. So you have which Azure service you can use for quickly sending millions of notifications to iOS and Android, Windows, Kindle devices working with APNs, Apple Push Notification Service, GCM, Google Cloud Messaging, WNS, Windows Push Notification, and more. So you are looking for a service which can quickly send millions of notifications to all type of devices basically. And this is clear answer then, because what Azure Notification Hub is a massively scalable mobile push notification engine for quickly sending millions of notifications to iOS, Android, Windows, or Kindle devices working with APNs, Apple Push Notification Service, GCM, Google Cloud Messaging, WNS, Windows Push Notification Service, and more. So for me, the clear answer is Azure Notification Hubs, because Azure Machine Learning is not related to this, Azure Monitor is not related to this, IoT Hub is not related to this, because IoT Hub is not for sending push notifications, but it is for receiving data. So the correct answer is Azure Notification Hub. Let's continue. I guess it's clear. So to what should an application connect to retrieve security tokens? Azure storage account is not responsible for security tokens. Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, yeah. Azure Security Center, no. Azure Key Vault might be if your tokens are stored in Azure Key Vault, but logically Azure AD authenticates users and provides user access tokens and to connect to any resource, Azure resource. And access token is a security token basically that is issued by an authorization server. Security token is not a secret, and token is not a secret, and password, private keys, certificates, etc are secrets, so which are stored in Azure Key Vault. And tokens are generated when request is made, and they change with almost each request and valid for short duration only. So there is no point in protecting the token by storing it in the key vault to use it when needed. It is not a static value. But if somehow you can still create tokens which are valid for 1 day or 2 days, and then you can still store them, but that's not the ideal way of working. So the correct answer is Azure Active Directory. Let's continue. You need to be aware of the latest security standards to protect your data. Which of the following services should you use to ensure this? You need to be aware of the latest Azure security standards to protect your data. So Azure government, what is it, why it is related to secure? Because anyway you might not be able to even use it. Online terms of use, this is related to a SaaS service which might have some online terms of use. Trust center, yes, and I will tell you what is trust center. And then you have Azure compliance documentation. So the trust center is the answer, but I will explain. Azure government addresses the security and compliance needs of US federal agencies, state government and local governments. The online terms of services is an agreement between Microsoft and you. The OST, online service terms, details the obligation of both parties regarding the processing and security of customer and personal data. But this is not related to you, as if you can be aware of the latest Azure security standards. The Trust Center implements Microsoft principles for maintaining data integrity in cloud. And Microsoft implements security, privacy, compliance, and transparency in all Microsoft cloud products and services. So the Trust Center is the ultimate answer. The Azure compliance documentation provides detailed documentation on Azure legal and regulatory standards and compliance. You can also see the reference blueprint that can be applied directly to your Azure subscription, which it will give in the Azure compliance document. So the correct answer is Trust Center. Let's continue. Again, yes or no question. Azure pay as you go pricing is an example of capex. I will explain what is capex and opex. Deploying your own data center is an example of capex. Azure reserved VM instances are an example of opex. So with the pay as you go model, you pay for services as you use them. This is an opex, because not an capex. Capex is where you pay for something upfront. For example, buying a new physical server. Deploying your own data center is an example of capex, because you need to purchase all the infrastructure upfront and you can use it And then reserved instance is where you pay upfront for the use of um, time, so 1 year or 3 years. This can save you money as you receive a discount on the cost of the VM if you pay upfront for the reserve instance. So this is an capex, it's not an opex. So answer is no, yes, no. Let's continue. Azure Cosmos DB is an example of which cloud offering? And the cloud offering questions are platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, serverless, software as a service. So the Cosmos DB is commonly known or used within web and mobile applications, and it is well suited for modeling social interaction, integrating with third-party services, and for building rich personalized experiences. The Cosmos DB SDK can be used build rich iOS and Android applications using popular Xamarin framework. And Cosmos DB is a complete solution which you can directly use without worrying about the underlying infrastructure. So this is not a infrastructure as a service, because you are not modifying the infrastructure itself, but you are getting that pre-built infrastructure. You are still able to configure it. So it is a platform which you are using. So that's the answer is platform as a service. Azure Cosmos DB is an example of PaaS service. I would still ask you to look for software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and serverless. But I will quickly explain you what is infrastructure as a service. So infrastructure as a service is something you get like a VM where you manage everything yourself. You just get a physical, let's say you just bought a laptop, but on that laptop you have to manage everything yourself, like OS, operating system, updates, maintenance, security patches, everything you have to maintain yourself. So that is IaaS service. Then you have platform as a service. So you are not worried about the underlying infrastructure, so the operating system, security patches, updates, but you are given a platform which works for you, as you can use it directly. And then there is serverless, which is like there is no concept of you don't have to worry about underlying hardware or software. It is space given for you on cloud. And software as a service is like a software which you provide online for your use. Yeah, let's continue. Then you have another question: a Microsoft SQL Server database that is hosted in the cloud and has software updates managed by Azure is an example of. So as I said, Microsoft SQL database that is hosted in the cloud and has software updates managed by Azure. That means okay, disaster recovery as a service, no. Infrastructure as a service, no, because uh, Azure is managing the updates. Platform as a service, yes. And software as a service, no. So the answer is platform as a service. Then let's continue. Your network contains an Active Directory forest. The forest contains 5,000 user accounts. Your company plans to migrate all network resources to Azure and decommission the on-premises data center. You need to recommend a solution to minimize the impact on users after the planned migration. So this is something related to migration, and you want to migrate your Azure Active Directory forest to Azure. Azure Active Directory is a Microsoft cloud-based identity and access management service which helps your employees sign in and access resources in external resources such as Microsoft Office 365, Azure Portal, and thousands of other SaaS applications. Internal resources such as apps on your corporate network and intranet, along with any cloud apps developed by your own organization. So um, what would you do first to do that, to support this? Implement Azure multi-factor authentication. This you can do, but this is not necessary to do to minimize the impact on users after planned migration. Second is sync all Active Directory users to Azure Active Directory. Yes, you have to do that because you need to put all the Azure Active Directory users to Azure Cloud Active Directory. Sorry, yeah, Active Directory users to Azure Active Directory. Don't be confused and be specific, because this is Active Directory and this is Azure Active Directory. So pay attention to it. Instruct all users to change their passwords. This doesn't help. Create a guest user account in Azure Active Directory for each user. This doesn't help because you are creating a guest account, but you need a proper account. So what is the correct answer? Sync all the Active Directory users to Azure Active Directory. Let's continue. So which of the following best explains cloud computing? Nice. Delivery of computing services over the internet. Setting up your own data center. Wow. Scalable computing. So scalable computing, this term exists or doesn't exist? Because scalability is one of the benefit of the cloud, but scalable computing, I don't know, I never heard this. Setting up your own data center. Why would you set up your own data center? Setting up your own data center is not cloud computing. It's same like on-premise resources. So the only answer possible is delivery of computing services over the internet, which is true in case of cloud computing. So the answer is delivery of computing services over the internet. Let's continue. Which of the following is not a feature of cloud computing? Good one. So the latest technology, yes, you get latest technology on cloud. A limited pool of services and flexible resources, true. Economies of scale, yes. So the only possible answer, because not a feature of cloud computing, it will be a limited pool of services. Let's see the answer. Yes, so that's the answer. Let's continue. You plan to extend your company's network to Azure. The network contains VPN applications that uses an IP address. This you need to create Azure resource that identifies the VPN appliances. Which of the Azure resources should you create? So there are a lot of options. You have until J, and these terms are also really important. I will put a link in the description below, but I would urge you to go and know about each and every specific term as well. Virtual network, load balancers, Azure network gateways, DNS zones, local network gateways, traffic manager profiles, network watcher, application network gateways, CDN profiles, express route circuits. So the answer to this is, because the network contains a VPN appliance that uses this IP address. You need to create Azure resource that identifies the VPN appliance. So what you need to create? Virtual network? No. Load balancer? No. Virtual network gateways? No. DNS zones? No. Local network gateway? Yes, because that's how you can then communicate to Azure. So the answer is local network gateway. Let's continue. You plan to implement an Azure database solution. You need to implement a database solution that meets the following requirements. Can add data concurrently from multiple regions. Can store JSON documents. Which database service should you deploy? So there are two conditions. Can add data concurrently from multiple regions, and you want to store data as also JSON document. So Azure Cosmos DB provides these two things, but let's continue and explore other options. Azure database for MySQL server, you cannot do the concurrency and also not the JSON document. SQL server, same, and not even this one. So only the Azure Cosmos DB provides this solution, because Only Azure Cosmos DB can add concurrently from multiple regions and also store data as JSON. So, which of the following best explains cloud computing? Delivery of computing services over the internet, setting up your own data center, scalable computing. I think we already have seen this question. So, the delivery of computing services over the internet is the answer. Let's continue. Which of the following is not a feature of cloud computing? Latest technology, a limited pool of services, flexible resources, economy of scale. We have already seen this. Not a feature of cloud computing is limited pool of services. So let's see. Yes, when you need to delegate permissions to several Azure virtual machines simultaneously, you must deploy Azure virtual machines to which of the following? When you need to delegate permissions to several Azure virtual machines simultaneously, so which of the following? Azure region, Azure availability zone, Azure resource group, Azure resource manager template. So Azure region doesn't help you in that one because you want to delegate permissions. Azure availability zone doesn't help you as well. Azure resource group, yes, because Azure resource group, then you can set permissions on the resource group level. So let's continue. One of the benefit of Azure SQL data warehouse is that high availability is built into the platform. So this is a statement and the question, then you need to answer the same way, no change needed or other options. So one of the benefits of Azure SQL data warehouse is that that high availability is built into the platform, which is correct because Azure SQL data warehouse can scale up, and so that is highly available. And also the redundancy is managed. A lot of all other cloud benefits are there. So yeah, it is highly available. So the answer is no. No change needed because it gives you scalability and fault tolerance. Yes and no question again. Authorization to access Azure resources can be provided only to Azure Active Directory users. What? Can be provided only to Azure Active Directory users? No. Identities stored in Azure Active Directory, third-party cloud services, and on-premises Active Directory can be used to access Azure resources. Not really. Azure has built-in authentication and authorization services that provide secure access to Azure resources. Yes, that is true. Because Azure has that. So the answer is no, no, and yes. Let's continue. To answer, drag and drop the appropriate benefit from the column on the left and to its description on the right. Each benefit may be used once, more than once, or not at all. So this will be your normal way of questions. You will not have anything here, not here, and not here. I have already given the answers, but you will have it like empty, so something empty here. Let's see. So an if then statement of assignments and access control, what it is, it, yeah, conditional access. Responsible for authentication, Azure ready, of course. And then RBAC, responsible for authorization. Pay the attention to these two words, authentication and authorization. Azure AD only gives you the authentication part. It returns that it says, okay, this user is known to me and this user has these blah 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 claims. But then it's up to the Azure resource itself or the application, whoever is requesting the authentication, to decide if they want to give them access to that specific resource or not. Then there will be use of authorization, which is in some cases you use RBAC, role based access control. So I hope that's clear. Let's continue. So yes or no question again. Azure China is operated by Microsoft. Azure government is operated by Microsoft. Azure government is available to US government agencies and their partners. So Microsoft Azure operated by 21 via net. Azure China is a physically separated instance of cloud services located in China. So Azure China is not operated by Microsoft. It is operated by via 21 via net, which is, yeah, Azure China. They have a specific cloud. And then for the Azure government is operated by Microsoft. Yes, it is. But yeah, it's not available to everyone. Azure government is available only to US agencies, yes, and partners, yes. Continue. Yes, no, yes, yes. Let's continue. Then your company implements Azure policies to automatically add a watermark to Microsoft Word documents that contains credit card information. Wow. So review the text if that makes sense, or no change needed. If the statement is incorrect, select the correct answer. So your company implements Azure policies to automatically add a watermark to Microsoft Word document that contains credit card information. So we need to see if by adding something to Azure policies, can you force this behavior. So Azure policies are generally policies that you apply on resources, um, but Microsoft Word documents, yeah, not really. Then you have DDoS protection. DDoS protection is basically for incoming traffic over to your incoming traffic to your Azure resources. Then you have Azure information protection. This is a special thing. Azure information protection is used to automatically add watermarks to Microsoft Word documents that contains credit card. You can use Azure information protection labels to apply classification to documents and emails. When you do this, the classification is identifiable regardless of where the data is stored or with whom it is shared. The label can include visual markings such as header, footer, watermark. Label can be applied automatically by administrators who define rules and conditions manually by users or combination. So basically, by using Azure information protection, you can protect your documents anywhere, who no matter who is using them. So the correct answer is Azure information protection. Let's continue. Again, yes or no questions, and the same, I guess it's yeah, same question again repeated, and that's not my fault. To your information, because there are not many questions in the exam, and these questions are repeated. That's why here as well, and these are like in a batch of here and there. So you might have another question here and vice versa. So yeah, Azure China is operated by 21 via net, which is correct. We just saw that. Microsoft Azure services operated by 21 via net are a standalone instance separating from Azure Global Services, which is also true because you have Microsoft has no interference to it. The service availability is not identical to Global Azure. Yes, true. So yeah, all of them seems yes. Let's see. Yes, so that all of them are true. Azure government is designed for Azure government worldwide, UK, US government, UK government. Obvious answer is US government. We have already talked about that. Let's continue. Microsoft Office 365, Xbox Live, and Microsoft Intune is an example of software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. Microsoft Office 365 is simple to differentiate. In infrastructure as a service, you need to manage even the OS you need to manage even the updates and everything. Then you get one level up, which is like you are given with a specific OS, but you need to manage many other things like dependencies, and tools and everything. Then go one more level up, which is software as a service, where you are given with everything configured. You can just configure few things which are like configuration. So it is simply a software, but it's available online. It's, you don't have to install it in your own laptop. So that means Microsoft Office 365 is similar to software as service, Xbox Live and Microsoft Intune as well, because you can only configure them, you cannot change anything. So these are example of software as a service. Let's continue. You have a resource group named RG1. You plan to create virtual networks and app services in your RG1. You need to prevent the creation of virtual machines only in RG1. The solutions must ensure that the other objects can be created in RG1. What should you use? A lock, an Azure role, a tag, and Azure policy. So as I discussed earlier, Azure policy is to bind your users or employees to follow certain rules. That means as an organization you can define certain rules and they have to follow those rules. So this is an example of Azure policy, because a lock cannot uh, certainly say that you cannot create a VM, but you can create other resources. You, because you want to ensure that other resources are can be created. So yeah, an Azure role is something which identifies you to be yeah, you can do certain things, and then yeah, you can still create some specific roles, but yeah, it doesn't fulfill the requirement here. A tag is just to identify, it doesn't stop you to from doing anything. So, but Azure policy does stop you. So the answer is Azure policy. um if you want to know about Azure policies, I have already told you. Azure policies can be used to define requirements for resource properties during deployment and for already existing resources. You can apply those rules to existing resources or for the new resources. Azure policy controls properties such as types or locations of resources. Azure policy is a service in Azure that you can use to create, assign, and manage policies. These policies enforce different rules and effects over the resource, so those resources stay compliant with your corporate standards and service level agreements. So basically Azure policy is really helpful for your for your organization. Again, yes and no question. Azure Advisor provides recommendations on how to improve the security of an Azure Active Directory environment. Azure Advisor provides recommendations on how to improve the security of Azure Active Directory environment. Azure Advisor is not looking actually in your Azure Active Directory environment. So this is already seems false to me. Azure Advisor provides recommendations on how to configure the network settings on Azure virtual network machine. Why would it tell you? Azure Advisor is not for this purpose, because it is not Azure Advisor's role to tell you how to configure the settings. It is your job as a developer. Azure Advisor provides recommendations on how to reduce cost of running virtual machine. That is true. So let's see the correct answers. No, and yes. So basically Azure Advisor analyzes your configurations and users telemetry and offers personalized actionable recommendations to help you optimize your Azure resources for reliability, security, operational excellence, performance, and cost. So basically Azure Advisor has nothing to do with Azure AD and configuring your network settings. Okay, next question. After you create a virtual machine, you need to modify the network security group to allow connections to TCP port 8080 on virtual machine on virtual machine. So it's the same question. You need to review if this statement is correct or not. Basically, what you are saying is, after creating virtual machine, you need to modify the NSG group to allow connections to port 8080 on the virtual machine, which is correct, because if you modify your NSG group and add a rule to allow traffic on the port 8080, you can then connect on this port to the internet. Your virtual machine can be connected, so that means your no change is needed. When you create a virtual machine, the default setting is to create a NIC attached to the interface NIC interface network interface assigned to the virtual machine. A NIC works like firewall. You can attach a network security group to virtual network or individual subnet within the virtual network. You can also attach the NSG to a network interface assigned to a virtual machine. You can use multiple NSG within a virtual network to restrict traffic between resources such as virtual machine and subnets. You can filter network traffic. You can do a lot actually. And in NSG contains security rules that allow or deny inbound network traffic to or outbound network traffic. So basically NSG is correct here. Let's go to the next one. Several support engineers plan to manage Azure by using the computers shown in table below. Computer 1 Windows 10, computer 2 Ubuntu, computer 3 Mac OS Mojave. You need to identify which Azure management tool can be used from each computer. What should you identify for each computer? To answer, select appropriate options in the answer area. So for the computer 1, let's see the Azure CLI and Azure Portal, Azure Portal, Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, and all of the three. So several support engineers plan to manage Azure by using the computers shown in table by using these things. Is it possible? Yes. Azure CLI can be installed everywhere. Azure Portal can be accessed everywhere using browser, and Azure PowerShell can be run on every system. So computer 1 can use, because computer 1 is Windows 10, it can use all of the three. And then the same is for the computer 2. Is it possible? Yes, because same logic. Azure CLI can be installed everywhere, Azure Portal can be accessed everywhere using the browser, and Azure PowerShell can be run on every system. So yes. And the third, can computer 3? Yes, all of them. So the answer, it might seem like blah blah confusing, but it might be a good option, and good option to secure nice points, because you will see these questions all together, and maybe three separate questions, and but all related and really easy ones. So this one is good one for securing some nice points. Azure Germany can be used by legal residents of Germany only. So we need to review this instruction and say yes or no if any change is needed. So what is Azure Germany? Azure Germany is eligible to customers and partners globally who intend to do business in EU EFTA, including the United Kingdom. Azure Germany offers a separate instance of Microsoft Azure services from within German data centers. The data centers are in two locations, Frankfurt and Magdeburg. This placement ensures that customer data remains in Germany and that data centers connect to each other through the private network. All customer data is exclusively stored in those data centers. A designed German company, the German Data Center Trustee, controls access to customer data and systems and infrastructure that hold customer data. So Azure Germany can be used by legal residents of Germany only. it is not true, because we saw that Azure Germany is available to eligible customers and partners globally who intend to do business in EU and EFTA. So no changes needed is not true. Only enterprises that are registered in Germany, not true. Only enterprises that purchase their Azure license from a partner based in Germany, that's something different. Any user or enterprise that requires its data centers to reside in Germany, that is one of the case. So the correct answer is any user or enterprise that requires its data to reside in Germany. Yes or no question again. Authorization to access Azure resources can be provided only by Azure Active Directory users. Again, wrong one, and I think we have seen this. Identities stored in Azure Active Directory, third-party cloud services, and on-premises Active Directory can be used to access Azure resources. Identities stored in Azure Active Directory, third-party cloud services, and on-premise Active Directory can be used to access Azure resources. How? But how? Azure has built-in authentication and authorization service that provides secure access to Azure resources. That is true. So the correct answers are no, no, yes. Let's continue. You need to ensure that when Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, users connect to Azure AD from internet by using an anonymous IP address, the users are prompted automatically to change their password. Which Azure service should you use? Nice. Azure Active Directory Identity Protection helps you keep informed and suspicious users and sign-in behavior in your environment. But Azure AD Connect Health? No. Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, this is something else, because PIM is used for specific purpose, such as you have given some specific, let's say, to your production environment you have given access, but the access is not activated. If you have any problem in your production environment and one of your developers needs to connect to that prod environment, your developer requests special access, privileged access, for a specific time, let's say 1 hour, 2 hour, to look into production environment, and then your developer is granted the access, and then after 1 hour that access is taken down. So the PIM is used only for that purpose. ATP, Advanced Threat Protection, is for this can be also used, but the Azure AD protection, Azure ADA protection helps you keep for the suspicious sign-ins. So for me, the D is the correct answer. Let's see. Yes. You plan to migrate a web application to Azure. The web application is accessed by external users. You need to recommend a cloud deployment solution to minimize the amount of administrative efforts used to manage the web application. What should you include in the recommendation? So you want to migrate the web application to Azure, which is accessed by external users. So your infrastructure as a service, you can do this by infrastructure as a service, but you need to recommend a cloud deployment solution to minimize the amount of administrative efforts. For an IaaS, you need to configure a lot of things. Database as a service, it cannot host a web application, of course. Software as a service is something which is already there. So only possibility is platform as a service, because then you can just deploy your application to the platform as a service, like Azure apps or things like that, and then you can just use it. So the correct answer is platform as a service. What can Azure Information Protection encrypt? Azure Information Protection can encrypt documentation and documents and emails. Azure Information Protection is a cloud-based solution that helps an organization to classify and optionally protect its document and emails by applying labels. So what it can encrypt? Network traffic, no. Documents and emails, yes. And Azure Storage Account, it's another service that encrypt. And Azure SQL database, No, it's another service itself. So the correct answer is document and email messages. Let's continue. What should you use to evaluate whether your company's Azure environment meets regulatory requirements? So the what should you use to evaluate whether your company's Azure environment meet regulatory requirements? So there are the knowledge center website, advisor blade from the Azure portal, compliance manager from the security trust portal, the security center blade from the Azure portal. Azure Security Center helps you to prevent, detect, and respond to threats with increased visibility into and control over the security of your Azure resources. It provides integrated security monitoring and policy management across subscriptions, helps you detect threats and might otherwise go unnoticed, and works with a broad ecosystem of security. Azure Security Center is enabled with your Microsoft Azure subscription and accessed from the Azure portal. You just sign into the portal and then select browse and scroll to the security center. You can directly go there. So the correct answer to this is Azure Security Blade from the Azure portal. You have an Azure virtual network named VNet1 in a resource group RG1. You assign an Azure policy specifying that virtual networks are not an allowed resource type in RG1. VNet is deleted automatically. So is this correct? VNet 1 is deleted automatically, but it says here you have an Azure virtual network named VNet 1 in resource group named RG1. So this VNet 1 is already in VNet RG1 resource group. You assign, so later on, once it's already there, then you assign Azure policy which says you cannot create a VNet 1 or virtual networks in this resource group. So what happens is, Azure policy, when you apply an Azure policy to an existing resource, it cannot delete it. If you create a new resource, it will ask you to it will you cannot create if you create a new resource with this. But if the resource is already there, it cannot stop, it cannot delete it. So no changes needed, that's not correct. Is moved automatically to another resource group, that is also not correct. Continues to function normally, yes, because it will have no effect. Is now a read-only object, no. So the correct answer is continues to function normally. Again, yes, no question. Azure firewall will encrypt all network traffic sent from Azure to the internet. Azure firewall encrypts all network traffic sent from Azure to the network, to the internet. Why would it? Azure firewall does not encrypt anything. So yeah, it seems no. And network NSG will encrypt all networks sent from Azure to internet. Also again no. Virtual machines that will run server this and can encrypt networks. Yeah, yeah, no again, because Azure firewall does not encrypt network traffic. It is used to block or allow traffic based on a source destination IP address and ports and protocol. A network security group does not encrypt network traffic either. It works in a similar way to a firewall in that it is used to block or allow traffic based on source and destination IP addresses and protocol. And the question is rather vague, because for the third one, it would depend on the configuration of the host on the internet. So I would prefer no. So the answer to this is no. So guys, this is just a break announcement. If you want to go for a break, I would say take a pause I think it's 1.5 hours till now, so you can take a pause and come back again or have a coffee. Because if this is not interesting to you, you will start falling asleep. And if you are not, if you are still awake, I would have to say, wow, good work to me. But I doubt it. So just enjoy a cup of coffee, and see you back again. I will continue. Let's go to the next one. Which of the following describes pass? A users are responsible for purchasing, installing, configuring, managing their own software, operating system, middleware. No. Users create and deploy applications quickly without having to worry about managing the underlying infrastructure. That's the advantage. Users pay an annual or monthly subscription. That is nothing to do with pass. So the correct answer is pass. User pass lets user create and deploy applications quickly without having to worry about managing the underlying infrastructure. Let's continue. So to answer, this is the same type of question where you have to drag and drop the correct service here and according to this sentence. So I have already done that, and sorry for that, but I didn't want to repeat the same step. This is a png I'm having to avoid the hard work I needed to do. Anyway, if we talk about it, provides a digital online assistant that provides speech support. So the Azure board services are doing that. Uses past trainings to provide predictions that have high probability. Azure machine learning studio, in Azure machine learning studio you have that option. And Azure Functions provides serverless cloud computing functionality, which you already know. Processes data of millions of sensor, which is Azure IoT Hub. Because we also had this question in previous slides. We had this question, Azure IoT, and if you see anything related to processing data from sensors, and that is in huge quantity, you always go for Azure IoT Hub. Let's continue. Your company has an Azure environment that contains resources in several regions. A company policy states that administrators must only be allowed to create additional Azure resources in a region in the country where their office is located. You need to create the Azure resources that must be used to meet the policy requirements. What should you create? An obvious read lock, doesn't matter. And Azure policy, we have already talked about it, that Azure policy enforces the rules your organization wants you to follow. So this will be the ultimate solution. A management group is management group who uses these policies to force on the employees. A reservation is simply used for cost reduction. So the correct answer is an Azure policy. I have already talked about Azure policy. Azure policy is a service in Azure that you use to create, assign, and manage policies. These policies enforce different rules and effects over your resources, so resources stay compliant with your corporate standards and service level agreements. Azure policy meets this need by evaluating your resources. So for example, if your organization had a policy which states that you cannot use certain SKU in your virtual machine, then when you try to create a new virtual machine, you cannot do that. So that was it about Azure policy. Let's continue to this question. You need to configure an Azure solution that meets the following requirements. It secures websites from attack, generates report that contains details of attempted attack. This is something DDoS protection, because Azure firewall is for allowing traffic to your service. A network security group is similar to Azure firewall. Azure information protection is something which protects your information or protects your data. And DDoS is something which secure your website from denial of service, distributed denial of service attack, and also generates reports for your data. So the correct answer is DDoS protection. As I said, distributed denial of service attacks are some of the largest availability and security concerns facing customers that are moving their applications to the cloud. A DDoS attack attempt to exhaust an application's resource, making the application unavailable to legitimate users. Because if there is too much traffic to your application, and then your application goes down because it cannot handle it or it cannot fulfill the needs, then it goes into the denial of to the users who are real, and the false users make you to shut down your service. So for that purpose you need to have DDoS protection. Let's continue. Your company has data centers in Los Angeles, in New York. The company has a Microsoft Azure subscription. You are configuring two data centers as geo clustered sites for site resiliency. Okay, you need to recommend an Azure storage redundancy option. You have the following data storage requirements. Data must be stored on multiple nodes. Data must be stored on nodes in separate geographic locations. Data can be read from secondary location as well as from the primary location. Okay, a lot of things are here. You need to pay attention again. So data must be stored in multiple nodes. Data must be stored on nodes in separate geographic locations, and data must can be read from the secondary location as well as from the primary location. So geo redundant storage, read only geo redundant storage, locally redundant storage. You really need to learn about these type of things, and I will put a link. But the correct answer for this is read only geo redundant storage. Data redundancy refers to the practice of keeping data in two or more places within the database or data storage system. So data redundancy ensures organizations can provide continued operations or services in event of something happens to its data. For example, in case of corruption or data loss, what you do? You have a secondary source of information or truth that you can use in case of data outrage. So for that you use these redundancy solutions. But in our case, the stored data should be stored on multiple locations, that is in geo redundant. Good. Then data must be stored on nodes in separate geographic locations, that is again geo redundant. Good. Data can be read from secondary location as well as from the primary location. So this is read only geo redundant, because we want to read only, we want he says in the third one that data can be read on from the secondary location. So the geo read only geo redundant storage is good. This also fulfill our need, but this one fulfills it better, because he didn't say they want it to be right as well. So the correct answer is B. You are building an application using a virtual machine in Azure. As a security requirement, it is necessary to apply Azure multi-factor authentication based on certain conditions. Which Azure service should you choose? So what is MFA? MFA is multi-factor authentication. Azure Monitor is incorrect, because this is for collecting what is known as application monitoring data. So, and Azure ATP is incorrect, because uh, it is used to monitor and analyze user activity and information across networks such as permissions and group memberships. Azure Active Directory ID protection allows you to apply MFA with condition. It is also used to detect risks such as anonymous IP address, logins, unfamiliar sign-ins, and credential leaks. So, and the which is Azure Security Center, is an integrated infrastructure security management system that enhances the security structure of the data center. It's an advanced threat protection feature that protects your entire hybrid workload both on cloud and on premise. With this option, you can't use MFA, but it is used for other many things. So the correct answer is Azure Active Directory ID protection. Let's continue. An Azure administrator plans to run a PowerShell script that creates Azure resources. You need to recommend which computer configuration to use run the script. Which computers can run the script? So let's see which computer can run the PowerShell script. A computer that runs Windows 10 and has PowerShell module installed, which is true. Yes. A computer that runs Mac OS and has PowerShell core 6.0 installed. No. A computer that runs Linux and has the PowerShell module installed. Yes. A computer that runs Linux and has Azure CLI tools installed, which is no again. A computer that runs Chrome OS and uses Azure Cloud Shell, which is a yes again. Let's continue. Your Azure environment contains multiple Azure virtual machines. You need to ensure that a virtual machine named V1 is accessible from the internet over HTTP. What are two possible solutions? Each correct answer present a solution. So your Azure network contains multiple Azure virtual machines. You need to ensure that virtual machine named V1 is accessible from the internet. Really easy answer, right? What you do? So either you modify the NSG or either you modify the firewall, because Azure Traffic Manager profile, again as I said, it is nothing to do with your VM access over the internet over the HTTP, and same way DDoS is nothing to do with it. So two ways you can do it is, one is NSG and another one is modify firewall. Correct answer is modify a network security group or modify an Azure firewall. Again, yes or no questions. Each Azure subscription can contain multiple account administrators. Each Azure subscription can be managed by using a Microsoft account only. An Azure resource group contains multiple Azure subscriptions. Okay, really good ones. So let's start with first. You can have one account administrator and one service administrator, but you can have 200 co-administrators per subscription. So the first one is wrong. B, you need an Azure Active Directory account to manage a subscription, not a Microsoft account. An account is created in the Azure Active Directory when you create the subscription. Further, the accounts can be created in Azure Active Directory to manage the subscription. So this is again no. The C, resource groups are logical containers for Azure resources. However, resource group do not contain subscriptions. Subscriptions contain resource groups. So again, this is also wrong. So the correct answers are no, no, no. Let's go. Which of the following provides a command platform for deploying objects to your cloud infrastructure and maintaining consistency throughout your Azure environment? Okay, which of the following provides a command platform for deploying objects to your cloud infrastructure and maintaining consistency throughout your Azure environment? Azure policy, which creates policies, and what we are asking here is objects provides commands to deploying objects to your cloud infrastructure. So not this one, not resource group. And then you have ARM, Azure Resource Manager, ARM and management. So ARM is Azure Resource Manager is a service that provides a management layer that allows you to create, update, delete Azure resources, all while maintaining consistency across your Azure environment. So using ARM, you can create, delete, update, and also maintain consistency. So this is the ultimate answer for you. Let's continue. Let's see Azure Resource Manager. Which of the following is a logical unit of Azure services that links to an Azure account? Which of the following is a logical unit of Azure services that links to an Azure account? Azure subscription, Azure management group, resource group. Good one. So Azure account. Which of the Azure service can be linked to an Azure account? Azure subscription, management group, resource group. Subscription, everyone has a subscription. Management group, not necessarily, and it is not linked. Resource group is not linked to an Azure account. So the correct answer is Azure subscription. But quite a logical question actually. Which of the following can be used to help you enforce resource tagging so you can manage billing? So the ultimate answer is Azure policy. I will not even think twice when you are trying to enforce something, enforce a rule on your resource creation. Then I would not even think twice before saying Azure policy. So the correct answer is Azure policy. Okay, which of the following refers to spending money upfront and then deducting that expense over time? Capital expenditure, operational expenditure, and then third is supply and demand. So what is the correct answer? Because you are paying money, spending money upfront. So the correct answer is capital expenditure. Not operational expenditure and not even supply chain. So let's continue. From the choices below, what is one of the advantages of moving your infrastructure to Azure? The move reduces capital expenditure, which is true. The move reduces operational expenses, not necessarily. The move allows for complete control of infrastructure resources. From the choices below, what is one of the advantages of moving your infrastructure to Azure? So if we talk about all of them, the capex is one of the benefit of Azure, because you are not buying your resources, you are not buying hardware in advance, you are paying for the resources you use. So that is something. Capex is one of the example of moving to Azure. So the correct answer is the move reduces capital expenditure. Which cloud model provides the greatest degree of ownership and control? Good one. So what is private cloud, what is public cloud, what is hybrid cloud? You need to know these three things. Let's so the answer to this is private, because which cloud model provides the greatest degree of ownership and control? In private cloud, you are the owner of that cloud. It is similar like your own data center. Whereas hybrid cloud is mix of on-premises resource and your private cloud, public cloud. So you are in control of your on-premises resources, and on till some degree you are also in control with your public cloud resources, but not really. And then the public cloud is like you are sharing your resources with other, you are sharing, not sharing the resources, but you are sharing the hardware with other people as well. So correct answer is private, which provides you the highest degree of ownership and control. Then you have which cloud model provides the greatest degree of flexibility. So you want to be flexible. So that answers the real answer. Quick answer is hybrid, because you can manage your own premises, uh, and you are also in control with public cloud, so you are simply enjoying both. Which cloud model provides the greatest degree of flexibility? Oh, this is wrong. So Azure reserved VM instances are an example of OPEX. Azure reserved VM instances are an example of OPEX. No, because when you have reserved VM instance, that means you have already paid for it. That is CapEx. Deploying your own data center is an example of CapEx, and paying electricity for your data center is an example of OPEX. Which is correct? No, sorry. So deploying your own data center is an example of CapEx, and deploying your paying electricity for your data center is an example of OPEX. True, because if you pay for your data center, that means you have paid, that is capital expenditure, so CapEx. And paying electricity bill, which is recurring every month, that means OPEX, because that is operational expense. So the correct answer is no, no, and yes. Yeah, this was not really a question, so it doesn't matter for this one. Let's continue. You have an Azure environment that contains multiple Azure virtual machines. You can plan to implement a solution that enables the client computers on your on-premises network to communicate to Azure virtual machines. You need to recommend which Azure resources must be created for the planned solution. Which two Azure resources should you include in the recommendation? So what you're doing here is you have an Azure environment that contains multiple Azure virtual machines. Okay, you plan to implement a solution that enables client computer on your on-premise network to communicate with Azure virtual machine. So what you need is a virtual network gateway, because that's how you can communicate with Azure Azure virtual machine from your on-premise servers. And along with it, you don't need a load balancer, an application gateway, no, a virtual network, and no, and then you have a gateway subnet. You also need a gateway subnet to specify about the information about your on-premise servers. I will urge you to know more about a virtual network, and what is application gateway, what is load balancer, and what is virtual network gateway. I will simply go for this first. Let's see the answers. Yeah, this is the answer. So A and E are correct answer. But what I was talking about is load balancer is simply used to balance the traffic to your Azure resources. Application gateway is another way of balancing, as well as it also helps you to add more filtering related to application, whereas virtual network is related to security and filtering. But this is not enough what I said, so I would really urge you to go to these definitions and at least try to understand them. Once you know them, then you don't need to worry about these questions. Azure, your company is planning to move from an on-premises environment to Azure, and you have decided to develop your application using Docker. Okay, good choice. As the development environment. Which of the following suits you the best? So if you're using Docker, you can use Azure App Service, Azure Container Instance, Azure Functions, Azure Virtual Machines. Azure Container instance is a service that runs Docker containers on demand within your Azure environment. It can operate inside a separate container without orchestration and run event driven applications, deploy quickly from the container deployment pipeline, and run the processing and run data processing and build jobs. Whereas Azure App Service is simple PaaS service which you can use to deploy your web applications. So here the correct answer is Azure Container Instance. Yes. Let's continue. So yes and question again. You can use Azure policy to download published audit reports and how Microsoft builds and operates its cloud services. So again, you can use Azure policy to download published audit reports and how Microsoft builds and operates its cloud services. No, really. You can use Service Trust Portal to download published audit reports and how Microsoft builds and operates its cloud services. Yes, because Service Trust Portal is the repository Azure uses to provide customers with Azure's compliance documentation, white papers, reports that includes documents like SSP that shows how Azure satisfies compliance requirements. So the Service Trust Portal um, is where you would go to understand how Azure satisfies any of the compliancy offerings listed here. So the answer to this is no, yes, and no. Let's see. No, yes, and no, because the second one is simply sorry. As here the only difference is this is saying download, because which is true, and this is saying upload. Okay, it's clear. Service Trust Portal is where you have all the compliancy related documents. Simple. Choose an international organization that develops international standards for privacy and compliance. So which is that organization? International Governmental and Defense Agencies. I don't know what is this. GDPR is generally for global. GDPR, what is it? Yeah, International Civil Defense Organization. No. International Organization for Standardization, ISO. Yes. So let's see the correct answer. Yes, ISO. Yeah, the GDPR is simply for your what do you call that? Sorry, for private information, yeah, protection. Let's continue. You need to identify the type of failure for which an Azure availability zone can be used to protect access to Azure services. So you need to identify type of failure for which an Azure availability zone can be used to protect access to Azure services. So a storage failure? No. An Azure region failure? No. A physical server failure? No. An Azure data center failure? Yes. Because what we are talking about here is Azure availability zone. So Azure storage, a storage failure is not related to it. An Azure region failure is bigger than availability zone. A physical server failure is smaller than availability zone. A data center failure is something for availability zone, because availability zones are used for different data centers. The correct answer is yes, an Azure data center failure. Let's continue. Again, yes and no question. North America is represented by a single Azure region. Azure Web App, Azure Logic App, Azure SQL databases are example of PaaS. DNS server runs on a virtual machine is PaaS, and SQL Server installed on a virtual machine is SaaS. Let's see. North America has several Azure regions, including West US, Central US, South Central US, East US, and Canada East. So, North America is represented by a single Azure region is wrong. In general, PaaS, platform as service, is about a platform where the developer can design and deploy an application, so the regular DNS server runs on a virtual machine is not PaaS. An Azure virtual machine is considered IaaS as it offers computing resources. So this one is a no. If you install SQL Server on a virtual machine manually or by using out of the box image, it is still virtual machine. This means customer still need to manage all of the platform aspects. In simple words, you have to maintain the operating system, settings, patching, middleware, SQL Server runtime settings, etc. So it is still not a SaaS service. So this is also no. The only yes is this one: Azure Web App, Azure Logic App, Azure SQL databases are an example of platform as a service. Let's continue. North America is represented by a single Azure region, which was already there. Am I repeating the same question? Okay. Continue. You need to identify the type of failure for which an Azure availability zone can be used to protect access to its services. We already have seen this, and I have already discussed this. Availability zones expand the level of control you have to maintain the availability of the applications and data on your VM. The availability zone is a physical separate zone within the Azure region. So, and an availability zone contains multiple data centers. So if one data center fails, it goes to another data center. So for that purpose, Azure availability zone is useful for an Azure data center failure. So the correct answer is Azure data center failure. Let's continue. Use DDoS protection service in combination with a web application firewall for protection both at the space layer 3 and layer 4 offered by DDoS protection standard, and at the blah 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 layer 7 DOS offered by a Windows firewall. So what is the answer here? Both at the net. So here, when you are talking about web application firewall, you are talking about ingress and egress IP address, source IP address. So that is something about network actually. And when you are talking about DDoS protection and at the layer 7, then you are talking about application layer, because you are protecting your Azure resources or application. So the correct answer is network and application. Let's continue. Is it clear? If it's not clear, please look for DDoS protection service, please look for firewall, and also please check what are the different layers. I guess this is not necessary for this level of exam yet, but this is really important if you are a developer to know what are the different level of layers which are used for communication between different resources. So there are 7 layers, and these are the layers which are important to know for which layer is used for which purpose. So the application layer is 7 layer. Let's continue. So a company is planning on deploying Microsoft Azure resources to a resource group. okay, but the resources would belong to different location. Can you have resources that belong to the same resource group but in multiple locations? Good question actually. And the answer to it, this is, what do you think? Can you have resources that belong to the same resource group but in multiple locations? Yes. A company is planning on hosting an application on a set of virtual machines. The virtual machines are going to be running on a prolonged duration of time. Which of the following should be considered to reduce the overall cost of virtual machine usages? So, a company is planning to host applications on a short set of virtual machines, okay, and you already know in the starting that the virtual machines are going to be running for prolonged duration of time. So you already know in advance that you are going to use them for long term. Then to save cost, why not to buy the virtual machine in advance so that you can save on cost up to 75%? So premium discs doesn't really give you an advance for the cost, it increases cost. Virtual machine scale sets, these are used for something else when you are when you are want to use high availability. So Azure reservations, which is like buying in advance, so which is one of the suggestion I said, and Azure resource group is not related to this at all. So the correct answer is Azure reservations. I hope it's clear. And just simple words, in simple words, Azure reservation is something where you pay in advance for a resource, for an Azure resource, because you know in advance that you are going to use it for long time. That means you can pay it in advance and then you get some discounts from Azure. Okay, let's continue. What are two characteristics of public cloud? And each answer presents a complete solution. Two characteristics out of these. Let's discuss what is public cloud. In public cloud, you don't have dedicated hardware. It is shared among multiple customers. Connections to the public cloud are secure. Storage is not limited. You can have as much as space storage as you like. Cloud does provide metered pricing as you pay for the resources you use. Cloud provides a self-managed service as you can use the portal to add, change and remove the resources you need when you need them. So the correct answer to this: dedicated hardware, no; unsecured connections, no; limited storage, no. So these three are wrong already, because in public cloud these are not the characteristics. So remaining are two correct by default, because it was asking for two. But anyway, let's see. Metered pricing, yes. Self service management, yes. So the correct answers are metered pricing and self-service management. Let's continue to the next one. NSG can be applied to what level? NSG can be applied to what level? Subscription level, subnet level, management group level, virtual machine NIC level. So subscription level, no, because NSG is mainly used for filtering traffic in and out of the virtual network in Azure. NSG can be applied at two levels, because subnet level, if you implement NSG at subnet level, all VMs in that subnet will be applied with the rules imposed in that NSG. And then you have NIC level, VM NIC level. NIC is network interface. If you apply at VM NIC level, the rule will be implemented only for that VM. Understand? So the correct answer is, or two actually, subnet level and virtual machine NIC level. Let's continue. The next one is, what are different level of access tiers for blob data? Select all applicable options. Hot tier, cold tier, archive tier, permanent tier. Bit confusing, but it's really easy if you just see. And the first three are the type of tiers provided by a storage account. So for the blob data, so hot is frequently accessed, cold is infrequently accessed, lower availability and high durability, and the archive is, if you know that you are not going to use it for a long time, then you use the archive. So the rarely or if ever access data, if ever you really rarely need it. But these are the three type of access tiers. Let's continue. What is Azure policy initiative? This is different. Azure policy initiative, so a collection of policy definitions, a collection of Azure policy definition assignments, group of Azure blueprints definitions, group of role based access controls. So this is not really related. This is again, yeah, blueprint is related but not to this one. So a collection was policy definitions and collection of Azure policy definition assignments. Don't be confused, because the correct answer is a collection of policy definitions. Initiative is something you create in advance, and say you assign few, you create few policy definitions, and this is like your organization took an initiative to give you certain rules. Okay, so the correct answer is a collection of policy definitions. Otherwise that could be really confusing. What is guaranteed in an Azure service level agreement, SLA, for virtual machines? Uptime, yes. Feature availability, no, because you are maintaining the virtual machine, not Microsoft. So feature availability is on you. You have to worry about it. Bandwidth, no. Performance, no, because performance is also for you to maintain because yeah, performance, like your machine cannot, might not be configured well, and it might not be performing well. So Microsoft doesn't take that guarantee. So the only guarantee Microsoft will take is uptime of your virtual machine. So the correct answer is uptime. Which statement accurately describes the modern lifecycle policy for Azure services? Microsoft provides mainstream support for a service for 5 years. No. Microsoft provides a minimum of 12 months notice before ending support for a service, which is correct. After a service is made generally available, Microsoft provides support for the service for a minimum of 4 years. No, I never saw this rule. When a service is retired, you can purchase extended support for the service for up to 5 years. Not possible. So the correct answer is Microsoft provides a minimum of 12 months notice period before ending support for a service. Just remember this, and you will definitely have a question based on this in your exam. Most Azure services are introduced in private preview before being introduced in public preview and then in general availability. Correct. Azure services in public preview can be managed only by using Azure CLI. No, you can manage them by all means. The cost of Azure services in private preview decreases when the service becomes generally available. No, it has nothing to do with the cost. So the correct answer is yes, no, no. Again, with a consumption based plan, you pay a fixed rate for all data sent to or from virtual machines hosted in the cloud. So what it is saying is, with consumption based plan, you pay fixed rate for all data sent to or from virtual machine hosted in the cloud. No. With consumption based plan, you reduce overall cost by paying only for extra capacity when it is required. Yes. Serverless computing is an example of consumption based plan. Yes. So you actually Azure function, when you really need to use Azure function, it is made available to you, otherwise it is in sleep mode. So basically you are not really acquiring a lot of space, your application is not really taking a lot of space actually. So yeah, it is beneficial consumption based plan. Let's continue. The answers for this were no, yes, yes. Let's continue. Azure services in public preview can be managed using which of the management tool? Both Azure Portal, Azure CLI. Yeah, there is no difference for Azure preview services. So the correct answers are both. You can associate a network NSG to a virtual network subnet, which we have already talked about. You can associate NSG to a virtual network, which we have already talked about. You can associate an NSG to a network interface, which we have already talked about. So yes, no, no, oh sorry, yes. You can associate 0 or 1 network security groups to each virtual network subnet and network interface in virtual machine. So the answer is yes, no, yes. You enable just-in-time VM access by using Azure Bastion, Azure Firewall, Azure Front Door, Azure Security Center. JIT VM access can be only enabled using Azure Security Center, because the JIT virtual machine access feature in Azure Security Center allows you to lock down inbound traffic to your Azure virtual machines. This reduces exposure to attacks while providing AZ access when you need to connect to a VM. So Azure Security Center makes sure that there is no attack, or it handles those attacks if you provide JIT access. Yeah, it is good for the security purpose. Then next, a company is using containers for deploying all of its web applications during a security audit. Okay, you notice that Microsoft Defender for Cloud is not being used properly to provide misconfigurations related to containers. For which resource can you not use Microsoft Defender for Cloud to secure the containers? So basically you need to talk about which resource cannot use Microsoft Defender for Cloud. AKS, yes, it can use container host, VM running Docker, yes. Azure Container Registry, yes, but Azure Container Instance, no. So the correct answer is Azure Container Instance. Azure Container Instance does not use Microsoft Defender for Cloud. ACI is a service that allows you to run containers in the cloud without using VMs. Okay, simple. Let's continue. You have an Azure environment. You need to create a new Azure virtual machine from the tablet that runs the Android operating system. Okay, what are three possible solutions? Three selections. You have an Azure environment. You need to create a new Azure virtual machine from that tablet that runs Android operating system. So what you need to use Bash in Azure Cloud Shell, use PowerShell in Azure Cloud Shell, use Power Apps tutorial, use the security and compliance admin center. Why? Use the Azure portal. So how can you how can you create new Azure virtual machines? There are three ways we already know: via using Azure portal, via using Cloud Shell, or via using PowerShell, and these are given here. And there are other possibilities like programmatically as well, using ARM or Bicep, whatever. But these three given solutions are here. So the correct answer is, you can use bash in cloud Azure Cloud Shell, use PowerShell in Azure Cloud Shell, use the Azure portal to create any virtual machine from your Android tablet, because these are accessible from any environment. Okay, let's continue. Azure Site Recovery provides fault tolerance for virtual machines. Okay, this sentence, Azure Site Recovery provides fault tolerance for virtual machines, is this sentence correct? So no change needed. Is this sentence wrong? So does it satisfy these? So Azure Site Recovery, forget this. Azure Site Recovery, then read from here, provides fault tolerance for virtual machines. What is fault tolerance? So disaster recovery is a fault tolerance, provides fault tolerance. Elasticity provides fault tolerance. High availability provides fault tolerance. The basic logic is disaster recovery. The correct answer is disaster recovery, because Azure Site Recovery helps ensure business continuity by keeping business apps and workloads running during outages. Site recovery replicates workloads running on physical and virtual machines from a primary site to secondary location, but it does not provide fault tolerance. So fault tolerance is disaster recovery. You should also stretch while watching this video. Tired, huh? No. An availability zone in Azure has physically separate locations across two continents. Instructions. So review this sentence. Is it correct? What is availability zone? No, availability zone is simply the lowest level of availability, which is then you have multiple Azure data centers in that one, but it doesn't talk about separate locations across two continents. So there is change needed within a single Azure region. Yes, so the ability into the, so within a single Azure region in Azure has physically separate locations across two continents. Yes, within multiple Azure regions within a single Azure data center. No. So the correct answer is within a single Azure region. Availability zone is a high availability offering that protects your applications and data from data center failure. Availability zones are unique physical locations within an Azure region. So the correct answer is within a single Azure region. Let's continue. A system ability to scale dynamically is called agility. No. Elasticity. Yes. Extendability. There is no word extendability in Azure cloud. So the only word is elasticity. When a system is elastic, that means it can adjust its processing power to match the demand. This means the system can allocate, deallocate resources dynamically. That means that is the elasticity of the system. So the correct answer is elasticity. Horizontal scaling and vertical scaling are two types of scaling in Azure, which is true, because horizontal versus vertical scaling. Auto scale only scale horizontally, which is an increase scale out or decrease scale in the number of VM instances. Horizontal is more flexible in a cloud situation, as it allows you to run potentially thousands of VM to handle load. In contrast, vertical scaling is different. It keeps the same number of VMs but makes the VM more stronger. So the scale up or scale down, so it makes the VM more powerful. So the vertical scaling is increasing the efficiency of the virtual machine itself, and horizontal is creating the same VMs, multiple instances of same VM. So the correct, it is true. Which of the following is correct life cycle of Azure services? So life cycle of Azure services means whenever a new Azure service is created or an existing and a new version is made available, how it is done. So they have the answer. Two, there are two options. One is dev preview, then public preview, then general availability, or is it private preview, public preview, and then general availability? So the correct answer is the first one, dev preview, and then general public preview, and then general availability, because uh, private preview is not a preview. It's not a preview if it's private, right? Who can see that then preview? Then keep it to yourself. So the correct answer is dev preview, public preview, and general availability. Logical as well. Okay, yes, no question. You can create group policies in Azure Active Directory. Yes, you can join Windows 10 devices to Azure Active Directory. Yes, you can join Android devices to Azure Active Directory. You can join Android devices to Azure Active Directory. No. So the answer is yes, yes, no. Let's continue. Which resources can be used as a source for a network security group inbound security rule? Which resources can be used as a source for a network security group inbound security rules? Application security groups only, IP address only, service tax only, and all of the above. As a source for NSG group inbound security rule. So yes, so IP addresses, service tax, application security groups. The answer is the last one. All of them can be used for NSG inbound security rule. The next question is, you have Azure subscription named subscription 1. You sign into Azure portal and create a resource group named RG1. From Azure documentation, you have the following command that creates a virtual machine. Okay, you need to create a virtual machine in subscription 1 by using the command from the Azure portal, launch Azure Cloud Shell and select bash, run the command in Cloud Shell. So, and does this meet your goal? Because considering this is correct command, you don't have to focus on this one. The question is about this one. You need to create a VM in Azure subscription 1 by using the command. The solution, you need to focus on the solution. Is that solution correct? From the Azure portal, launch Azure Cloud Shell and select bash and run the command in the Cloud Shell. They are just asking you if it is possible from Azure portal to launch Azure Cloud Shell and select bash and run the command. Yes, it is possible. So does this solve the meet the goal? Yes. So the answer is yes. Sometimes it can be confusing to know, yeah, because the question is so big, so we focus on is this command correct or what. So basically don't get distracted, just focus on the solution and try to find a few keywords here. And the next question for the same is, from a computer that runs Windows 10, install Azure CLI from a command prompt, sign into Azure and then run the command. Which is, again, you can do that because if you have a computer which is on Windows 10, you have installed Azure CLI and then from command prompt you sign into Azure and then you can run the command. So yes, this meets the goal. Yes. So the answer is yes. The same question for the next one goes to the solution from computer that runs VM. The answer is yes. So the next question, from a computer that runs Windows 10, install Azure CLI from a command prompt and sign into Azure and then run the command. Then it meets the goal. Yes. Okay, so that was it for me. How did you find the this video? Please let me know. And if you thought that I made some mistakes, please answer them in the comments, and I will look into it, and I will, if possibly, I will change the answers, and if there was any mistake. And please let me know what type of next video you would like to have, because I I really want to help. And yeah, so I need your, you need your suggestions what you want next. Until then, thank you for watching. Tech of the day, and enjoy your day. Please, disclaimer, these are not the questions I had in exam. I signed NDA, I cannot share them here. 900 Azure Fundamentals. This is the first certification you do in order to get started with Azure and cloud. So you start your journey with cloud with this certification. This certification is not compulsory